So we'll have a reading from the book of Numbers.
The rabble among them had a strong craving, and the Israelites also wept again and said, "If only we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we used to eat in Egypt for nothing, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. But now our strength is dried up, and there is nothing at all but this manna to look at." Now the manna was like coriander seed, and its color was like the color of gum resin. The people went around and gathered it, ground it in mills or beat it in mortars, then boiled it in pots and made cakes of it. And the taste of it was like the taste of cakes baked with oil. When the dew fell on the camp in the night, the manna would fall with it. Moses heard the people weeping throughout their families, all at the entrances of their tents. Then the Lord became very angry, and Moses was displeased. So Moses said to the Lord,
"Why have you treated your servant so badly? Why have I not found favor in your sight that you lay the burden of all this people on me? Did I conceive all this people? Did I give birth to them? That you should say to me, 'Carry them in your bosom as a nurse carrying a suckling child to the land that you promised on oath to their ancestors?' Where am I to get the meat to give to all this people? For they come weeping to me and say, 'Give us meat to eat.' I am not able to carry all this people alone, for they are too heavy for me. If this is the way you are going to treat me, put me to death at once if I have found favor in your sight, and do not let me see my misery."
So the Lord said to Moses,
Gather for me 70 of the elders of Israel, for you know to be the elders of the people and officers over them. Bring them to the tent of meeting, and have them take their place there with you. I will come down and take with you there, and I will take some of the Spirit that is on you and put it on them, and they shall bear the burden of the people along with you, so that you will not bear it all by yourself. And to the people, consecrate yourself for tomorrow, and you shall eat meat, for you have wailed in the hearing of the Lord, saying, 'If only we had meat to eat. Surely it was better for us in Egypt.' Therefore the Lord would give you meat, and you shall eat. You shall eat not only 1 day, or 2 days, or 5 days, or 10 days, or 20 days, but for the whole month, until it comes out of your nostrils and becomes loathsome to you, because you have rejected the Lord who is among you, and you have wailed before God, saying, 'Why did we ever leave Egypt?'"
But Moses said,
"The people I'm with number 600,000 on foot. And you say, 'I will give them meat that they may eat for a whole month?' Are there enough flocks and herds to slaughter for them? Are there enough fish in the sea to catch for them?"
The Lord said to Moses,
"Is the Lord's power limited? Now you shall see whether my word will come true for you or not."
So Moses went out and told the people the words of the Lord, and he gathered 70 elders of the people and placed them all around the tent. Then the Lord came down in the cloud and spoke to him, and took some of the Spirit that was on him and put it in the 70 elders. And when the Spirit rested upon them, they prophesied, but they did not do so again. 2 men remained in the camp, one named Eldad and the other named Medad, and the Spirit rested on them. They were among those registered, but they had not gone out to the tent, and so they prophesied in the camp. And a young man ran and told Moses, "Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp." And Joshua, son of Nun, the assistant to Moses, one of his chosen men, said, "My lord Moses, stop them." But Moses said to him,
"Are you jealous for my sake? Would that all the Lord's people were prophets, and that the Lord would put God's Spirit on them." The word of the Lord for the people of God.
We talk a lot about trauma here because everyone we work with is a survivor of trauma. Every single person. Homelessness is a trauma. Food insecurity is a trauma. Just like a car accident or sexual assault or bullying or witnessing violence or living through a global pandemic or living as a person of color in the United States are all traumas. Every single person carries trauma. And some people have layers upon layers of trauma they are coping with. A traumatic experience is one that's overwhelming, involves threat, results in loss of control, and interferes with a person's fundamental beliefs and their ability to function. Care that centers around the survivor and takes into consideration the unpredictable and unfair effects of trauma is called trauma-informed care. Through this approach, care providers promote safety and offer back some control by providing choice and autonomy. They listen with compassion and follow through on whatever they say they're going to do. They practice solution-focused problem solving, and they validate each person's experience. In every interaction that they have, in everything that they do, they actually see the person in front of them. They treat them with dignity and work to heal them and put them back together again. Our God is a trauma-informed care provider. God hears God's people crying in the wilderness, crying in slavery, crying in exile, crying at the pool, crying at the tomb, and God listens to them. God hears what they're crying for. And even though it's God still practices trauma-informed care by not jumping to conclusions and by allowing God's people to tell God what they need. And God validates it. In exile, the people cry for rescue, and God cries with them. God gives them choice and inspires them to claim some control even in the midst of their overwhelming situation. God says, go ahead, build houses, plant gardens, marry and have children. I know it's hard, but it's okay, because I'm planning to prosper you wherever you are, even here. At the well in Samaria, our God incarnate takes the time to sit with and listen to a woman isolated from everyone else. He sees her through and through, giving her a healing gift of belonging and recognition she's desperately craving. And in the desert, 600,000 of God's people are crying because they've already been wandering for 2 years, and it feels so long already. It's grace that we don't know how long our wilderness journeys are going to be when we step out onto them. Otherwise, if we knew we would still be here 18 months later, or 2 years later, or 40 years later, we might not ever have the courage to take that first step. They've been eating the same thing every day for every meal, and they are freaking tired of manna. The manna, it saves their lives every day, but they're human, and they're suffering in the desert. Life in slavery seems better at this point. They say, with all the meat and the vegetables, whenever they wanted. If they could just get some relief, just something different, they could keep going a little longer. It could even help them cross the finish line. Moses gets mad at them. Moses is always getting mad at them whenever they have some complaint against God. Because this has happened before, the water coming from the rock in the wilderness, or the manna, or the bitter water turning drinkable, Moses should be learning that God is big enough to hold these complaints. They're listening to their bodies. Our bodies, no matter what sort of emotional stress we have endured, will hold on to it until we work through it. Trauma will manifest as chronic headaches, insomnia, muscle tightness or weakness, imbalances, fatigue, numbness, stroke, heart attack. And when we stop long enough, or we have nothing else to pay attention to but our bodies, or we enter the right yoga pose, our bodies will scream out and force whatever we're ignoring into the light. We might not have the words to explain what's going on, but we know something is wrong and something needs to change. Our bodies are so tired, the Israelites are saying. And all we've got to take care of them is this manna. This time, it's a little different, though. They're asking for more than they need. So God gets frustrated. And Moses turns to God and, desperate, says, "This is too much for me." Moses is listening to his body too. His emotions are drained from more than 2 years of wilderness wandering himself. He's living through trauma too. Plus, he's been caring for all these people at the same time. 600,000 people is a lot for one person to pay attention to. A shelter of 200 people is a lot for one person to pay attention to. A church of people is a lot for one person to pay attention to. And I can tell you, 30 people is a lot for one person to pay attention to, especially when you are simultaneously living your own experience of trauma. After 9 months of pandemic, 9 months of 2 daily check-in phone calls to graduates of our Living Well program, I made the decision to stop making phone calls for 2 months, January and February of 2021. Keeping consistently in touch with our participants is really important, but it got hard when every single person's trauma levels were increasing and they were feeling unstable. And it was especially hard because I was carrying their stresses alongside my own. I realized I needed to take a break when I was on a call and I had no idea what the person on the other side was talking about because I had dissociated 5 minutes before. In the past year, 4 out of 5 of my closest partners in this work with Living Well have left their jobs. For at least 6 months, I listened to Mary, one of my dearest and closest colleagues, tell about the stresses of her work and how she could barely hold it anymore. She kept saying she was ready to find a job with less responsibility. In the past year, I have also witnessed women who are survivors of terrible trauma go through the difficult process of realizing they no longer have the capacity to care for their own parents. They finally had to let go in order to find their own health and well-being. And I think that's what Moses is feeling. And he tells God that much. I can't carry all these people by myself, he says. They're too heavy for me. God hears the trauma and immediately offers some solution-focused problem solving. Bring 70 leaders to me, God says to Moses. I'll pour my spirit out on them too. You won't have to bear this alone. And by the way, God says, I'll give them meat to eat. Moses is skeptical. There's too many of them to find enough meat in a desert. But God says, is God's power limited? Humanity is wired towards scarcity, especially those of us who live in capitalism. We look around and think that we don't have what we need. God is the opposite of scarcity. God is abundance. God is the feeding of the 5,000, Lazarus raised from the dead, and the Spirit falling on all of God's people. In community development, in building capacity, and even in counseling, there's an approach that says, what we need is here. We don't need to go outside of our community to get answers. We have the answers to our questions built into us already. So the practice is to look around with eyes that recognize those already inherent light of God gifts in every person, in each neighborhood, and to recognize those assets as tools for transformation. Our rooftop farm is one example of really good asset-based community development. An empty space full of sun, a few organizations with inspiration, and a bunch of neighbors with green thumbs. God pours the Spirit out on everyone. God builds into us everything we need. God moves among us and empowers us to support each other. God pours the Spirit out on these desert wanderers, even on some who Moses didn't gather in. God's Spirit is overflowing and moves among them. Moses isn't alone anymore. Last week, our Living Well leadership team met to prepare for the fall. We did a little resource training and we collaborated on care for our community. We sat around the table and gave updates on each person on our care call lists. I listened for the people who could use some extra support, and I made a note to call them this week. We began the leadership team in December of 2020 because, number one, it feels unjust for me to be a white woman in charge of a community of mostly people of color who are inherently gifted in leadership. And two, because I had seen how good these women are at caring for each other, and I could use their help. So we are bearing the burden together of caring for the Living Well community. I call and check in on the leadership team, and they call and check in on me. They have brought me back to life in moments when I feel like I'm losing it. I know now I cannot do this work without them anymore. And it's clear God is moving among our community through them. Whether it's raising children or discerning the next right thing, we need community to let the dog out, to bring a casserole, to give us a break when we need it, and to speak prophetically to us. We need each other. Our people are the way we ignite and shine the God light that is within us. Our people are the way that we receive the light back. Community is a mutual exchange of love, and we can be a part of healing and nurturing each other. There's so much we cannot bear on our own, whether we are individual or a whole organization. In Rauschenbusch Metro Ministries' mission statement, the first sentence says, "In collaboration with Metro Baptist Church and a network of partners, RMN provides direct and educational services that promote individual and community growth." Just to run Living Well, we need Fordham University, the Interfaith Assembly on Homelessness and Housing, more than 20 referring organizations, City Beat Kitchens, a whole bunch of mentors, and a whole bunch of dessert providers. And we couldn't do it without any of them. To prepare our holiday meals, we bring in Chef Red and Tabernacle Baptist Church. We expand our capacity when we work together. And we're able to do so much more because we share power and collaboration. You're not going to have to bear this burden alone, God says. Even in the darkness, even while our potential feels dormant like the life waiting inside a seed, maybe we are beginning to have control over our lives again. But even here, God does not leave us alone. We don't journey the wilderness alone. We might not know what's coming, and trusting might go against every instinct we have. But God is bringing something new. We might be tired of manna or masks or talking about COVID in every sermon. But God's promise is that what's coming is better than meat. And in the meantime, when we reach out, when we engage the gifts around and within us, there's freedom and wholeness for us now. We go together, sharing the burden, taking care of one another and bringing good news to each other. And there's joy in that solidarity. There's joy in the collaboration. We witness miracles because of it. And we witness ourselves being put back together again. God's power is not limited. Wendell Berry's poem, Wild Geese, reflects on the abundance and healing that's waiting for us now. He says, "Horseback on Sunday morning, harvest over, we taste persimmon and wild grape, sharp, sweet of summer's end. In time's maze, over fall fields, we name names that went west from here, names that rest on graves. We open a persimmon seed to find the tree that stands in promise, pale in the seed's marrow. Geese appear high over us, pass, and the sky closes. Abandon, as in love or sleep, holds them to their way, clear in the ancient faith. What we need is here. And we pray, not for new earth or heaven, but to be quiet in heart and in eye clear. What we need is here. May it be so.